Lesson 11-4, Proportions. By the end of today's lesson, you will be able to determine if two ratios form a proportion, as well as find a missing term to form a proportion. Make sure you have your pencil and paper ready so you can take notes and follow right along with me. So for today's lesson, it's very important that you understand what a proportion is. So go ahead and write this definition down. It says a proportion is an equation that shows two ratios are equivalent. So let's see that in practice. If we were making a trail mix and we have 2 cups of nuts and 6 cups of dried fruit, would that be equal if we wanted to mix up and make a bigger batch of this? Would 3 cups of nuts to 9 cups of dried fruit give us that same proportion of nuts to fruit? So there's 2 ways to check this ratio to see if it forms a proportion. The first way is to write the ratios as fractions in simplest form. So if the fractions are the same, the ratios would be equivalent. So let's write those down. It would be 2 over 6. Is that equal to 3/9? So now we take a look and we say, well, 2/6, that would reduce down. We could divide those each by 2. And that would give us 1/3. Then on this side, we could divide these each by 3. 3 goes in here 1 time, and 3 goes in here 3 times. So that equals 1/3. So yes, 1/3 to 1/3, those would be a proportion. They're equal to each other. The next way to figure out if a ratio forms a proportion is by using the cross products rule. So two ratios form a proportion if their cross products are equal. So let's take a look at what that means. The product of the extremes is equal to the product of the means. And that would look like this. A to B is equal to C to D. These are the extremes. A and D are the extremes, and B and C are the means. So I've color coordinated it right here. So then you could also write it as A times D is equal to B times C. So this is your fractions. These are your proportions or your ratios. Then you're going to multiply. A times D is equal to B times C. And if those are equal, then your ratio is also a proportion. So if we were to look back and use our previous example where we were figuring out if 2 cups of nuts to 6 cups of dried fruit would be the same as 3 cups of nuts to 9 cups of dried fruit. So we would write it like this. 2 to 6 is equal to 3 to 9. Then we would multiply our extremes, which would be here, our 2 and our 9. So 2 times 9. And then we would also multiply then our means. 6 times 3. 2 times 9 equals 18. 6 times 3 equals 18. Those are equal, so it is a proportion. Okay, we can also, if we set it up like this, it actually looks like the cross products rule because we're going to be multiplying the 6 times 3 and the 2 times 9. So when we're cross multiplying, it looks like we're crossing it. So 2 times 9 would equal 18. And 6 times 3 equals 18. And that reduces down to 1. So that means that they're a proportion. So let's use that cross products rule to determine if 1/5 is equivalent to 6/10. So we're going to multiply the 1 times 10, and that gives us 10. And then 5 times 6, and that gives us 30. And we can see, nope, that doesn't go down to 1, so no, that one would not be a proportion. Try 6/10, see if that is a proportion to 18 over 30th, and then check with me. So our first one would be 6 times 30, and that would equal 180. And then 10 times 18 equals 180. And yep, that reduces down to 1. So that would be a proportion. So yes, that's a proportion. Sometimes we'll be given a problem that looks like this. 7 over 3 is equivalent to 28 over what? Well, here we're going to be multiplying to figure that out. We know that we can multiply the top and the bottom by the same number, and it doesn't really change the value of the fraction because we're essentially multiplying by 1. So if I say 7 times what equals 28? I know that would be 7 times 4. So then I need to multiply this bottom by 4. So 3 times 4 equals 12. So 12 would give us, or 12 would be what that n equals. So I want you to try 5 over 1 would be equivalent to 15 over n. So figure out what that n equals and then come back and check with my work. So I would first multiply 5 times what equals 15. I know 5 times 3 equals 15. So I also need to multiply my bottom by 3. So 1 times 3 equals 3. So n equaled 3. Is that what you were able to come up with also? Okay, I want you to try one more. Let's try n over 1 is equivalent to 14 over 7. So figure out what n equals, then come back and check against my work. So here I'm going to look, and I know 7 goes into 14 2 times. So over here, I would say, okay, this side equals 2. What would I need to make this n equal so that it equals 2? It would be a 2 over here as well. 2 over 1 equals 2. So that n would equal 2. Here we're given 3 different fractions, 4/5, 20 25ths, and 5/4. And we need to pick 2 of these are actually equivalent ratios, and they would form a proportion. So we need to find which 2 of these would be the equivalent ratios. So I want you to see if you can figure that out. You're going to be checking 2 at a time to see if it makes a proportion, and then come back and check against my work. So the first 2 I'm going to check would be 4/5 and 20 over 25ths. So if I multiply, I have 4 and 25, and that would equal 100. And then 5 times 20, that equals 100. So I lucked out by the first 2 I checked. They actually equal a proportion. So 4/5 is equivalent and makes a proportion to 20 25ths. So let's try one more set. So if we have the fractions 20 tenths, 2 over 1, and 4/5. Go ahead and try those and then come back and check against my work. Okay, I'm going to do my work right up here. So if I first do 20 over 10 and multiply and check that with 2 over 1. So I have 20 times 1 equals 20, and then 2 times 10, that equals 20. So right off the bat, it was the first 2 again that I happened to check. That reduces down to 1, so the answer would be 20 tenths is equivalent to 2 over 1. Go ahead and rewatch any part of today's lesson before heading off to do today's math.